communications or messages between Iran and the United States. What we've learned so far that Iran has responded. The final sort of proposal on the part of Iranian is a 14-point plan. And what is the difference before getting to these 14 points? And is that Iran is asking for a duration of the ceasefire to be 30 days, and the United States is talking about 60 days. And the other point about this new proposal, basic points, the most important points is so much similar to what we've seen with the 10-point plan, if you remember that, which basically is talking about guarantees against aggression. When it comes to the guarantees against aggression, and the first point and the second point, somehow they're similar because they're asking the United States to withdraw its troops from GCC countries and from other countries as well. It says in Iran's surroundings. So basically, these 2 points are related to each other because if you're prepared to find a permanent solution to what's going on, you have to give guarantees. But the problem is that the United States is not going to give anything of that sort to Iran. Basically, when it comes to the American bases, the reality is there. They're not going to be able to get back the way it was before because they had radars, they had everything there. And right now I would assume that in the United States, they're thinking if they do that, if they get back the way it was before, so who's going to guarantee that Iran is not going to attack them again and destroy everything? Because the reality of what has happened during this 40-day war, that Iran was able, as it said before, that it's going to attack American bases and destroy basically the crucial and important elements in that bases, which are radars, which are the communication systems, electric warfare systems, all of these complexities or these sort of complex equipment in these bases. And right now, Iran is talking about troops. They're not talking about radars. They're not talking about anything else because they know that the radars they can hit these radars as soon as they decide to. And it's for the United States. Are they prepared to put them back in the GCC countries? I don't see that happening. If they continue with this sort of aggression, because the number of American troops in the region is important, as Iranians are trying to, they don't want the United States in the region. And you have to understand that because this is not the Gulf of Mexico. This is the Persian Gulf. This is all about the countries in the West Asia. So the final goal, I think, looking at the 14-point plan on the part of Iranians, they're basically focusing on a new security architecture for the region. In this new security architecture, the United States is not part of it. Basically, Iranians know they cannot remove the United States from GCC countries when it comes to the intelligence, CIA, Mossad, all of these sort of, entities or groups or institutions. But they know physically the United States, they can force the United States out of the region physically in terms of radars, in terms of number of troops. They can reduce them basically. And this is the official sort of mindset right now in Iran. And the other point that we see these days are talking about, Iran is talking about releasing, frozen assets. The people, Donald Trump, if you remember, Donald Trump was talking about how Obama and his administration sent a lot of money to Iran after JCPOA was signed by all sides. But those money, those sort of, actions on the part of the Obama administration, it wasn't because of they're just giving something to Iranians. It was Iranian asset being seized, being frozen by American, governments for many years, and they're releasing them. It's not, Donald Trump talking about it as though the United States is giving something, contributing something to Iran, but it's not. That's not the case. It's Iranian money getting back home. This is the problem, and Iran has right now each and every leverage to put pressure on those countries who participated or facilitated or helped the United States to do those sort of policies, to make those sort of policies, to put force on Iranian people for such a long time. And because you have to understand the Iranian society is not something, it's not all about after, because it's so much similar to what has happened in Gaza after the October the 7th. Because many people are asking, what has happened? Why did this war start? Everybody's talking about the Hamas attack on Israel and all of that. But this conflict is long before the October the 7th. There is a history behind it. You have to see all these issues together. You cannot come to the, October the 7th and basically making things up. For Iranian case, it's the same. There is a history behind what has happened, which literally means what has happened in the aftermath of the revolution in Iran. And Iran knows that. There is no way for the Trump administration to open up the Strait of Hormuz or to resolve the conflict or this issue in the Middle East without considering all those issues that somehow, continued and, as a snowball is getting bigger and bigger as it goes on and on. And this is the reality on the part of I'm talking about the issues between Iran and the United States. And right now, what Iran is feeling, they don't want that anymore. Because the final goal of the United States is basically weakening Iran economically, militarily, putting a lot of pressure on Iranian society, making these groups of globalists, democracy, human rights, and all of this and that, and these beautiful names, and going in Iran and putting pressure on Iranian society, making these groups inside Iran participate and cooperating with these CIA, Mossad agents outside of Iran, and destabilizing the country. This is the whole plan. It's not just yesterday or the day before or 40 days ago. It's a long-term plan on the part of the United States and Mossad. It's literally goes to the 1980s, when the revolution has happened in Iran. Iran totally understands that. Iran knows what is the reality of what's going on. It's not just about bringing Iran to its knees. It's about destroying Iran as it is today. They don't want Iran to be independent, a sovereign nation. But this is not the reality of Iran. What they feel about it, what is amazing about Donald Trump, he doesn't understand, Iran and the Iranian society, Iranian civilization. With the case of blockade is nothing. When I'm saying that is nothing, it doesn't mean that they're not putting pressure on Iran, on Iranian economy. The pressure is there, and they're hitting the Iranian economy. But there is something else that is happening when it comes to civilizations, in my opinion. We have a concept in geotechnical engineering, we call it, when it comes to the soft soils. Soft soils are, the most problematic soils in our field to deal with. But soft soils, during years and years, they can consolidate. The consolidation that happens to these sort of soils, it brings it to a new configuration. You see the particles getting closer, and it's getting prepared to respond to any sort of load that comes above this sort of soil. Iranian society is the same, in my opinion. And the similarity between civilization and the soft soil, I would say, that during years and years, as we call it in soils, they remember what has happened in the past. And they know what has happened. They know how to respond to that. And, with these consolidated soils, you see, when you put a lot of pressure on them, they know how to respond. They settle, but they know they settle not drastically. They settle little by little. They feel the pressure. They understand the pressure. The pressure is there. You cannot deny the pressure of the blockade or the pressure of the sanctions. But the game changer is that the society or the soil knows how to respond to that. It's not going to get them by surprise. They're not going to panic because of the load is coming on them. This is the reality of, maybe it's so much confusing for American people or for American society, for the people in the West, because they have never been under sanctions. They don't know what is sanction. And Iran knows what is that. Iran knows how to respond to that. Iranian people, how they know how to deal with these sort of difficulties, economic difficulties. And this is, I think, I'm not here to deny what's going on with the Iranian economy and the level of pressure that the United States has been putting on Iranian economy and Iranian people. They were starving many people around the world. It's not just about Iran. Just look at these regime of sanctions. It's unbelievably. They have destroyed many parts of this world, of famine, everything. Many people were, killed because of these sort of policies. But we have societies like Iran. They know how to consolidate, how to respond, how to absorb these sort of pressures. This is the reality of what's going on. I think the United States needs to understand, the Trump administration needs to understand that. I don't see that happening. So far, I haven't seen any sort of sign that is any understanding in the Trump administration about what's going on. And the other point in this new plan of Iranian is the compensation and the sanction. And they're asking for sanctions to be lifted because they don't want that anymore. Why they're talking about it? Because they're so much comfortable with the situation they're in right now. If the United States decides to go to war, they're prepared. They said that. If they try more sanctions, which doesn't make sense in my opinion, because there is nothing else, left to be sanctioned. They have everything. Everything is sanctioned in Iran. And with the case of oil, Iran has experienced this sort of blockade long before in the Trump administration when he was elected for the first time. So they were talking about something like 2 million barrels, more than 2.5 million barrels a day they were exporting before Donald Trump being elected in the first term in the United States. It was 2017, 18. But in 2018, since Donald Trump has decided to withdraw from the JCPOA, then the regime of sanctions was, they put it in again. They tried to put pressure on Iran, and they reduced the export, the oil exports. So it was reduced to 400. Some sources say 400,000 barrels a day. But I talk with the people in Iran who are informed. They said it was reduced to zero, literally. Between 2018 and 2020, it was reduced. I think Professor Marandi once explained this on this podcast. And it was reduced to zero. It means that those barrels that Iran was exporting those days, it was just about how China was doing some projects in Iran. So Iran, to pay China, was sending these barrels to China. It wasn't just Iran selling oil. That's the reality. And right now, it's not anything of that sort. Before coming up, we've learned that, a new tanker with 1.9 million barrels just cut through the blockade, and it got out of, the Persian Gulf and the area that the United States is trying to control with this blockade. So the blockade is, I would say, failing because the combination of the pressure that this blockade is putting on Iran and the way that Iranian is responding, I think puts Iran in a comfortable position. And Iran is prepared to continue with this condition. Just when you look at, for example, various reports on Fox News, CNN, they're basically talking about how this blockade is influencing the food inside Iran. Yeah, they can influence the food, but which elements of these, this complex, this huge list of, items can be influenced by that? 90% of the Iranian food is produced domestically. What Iran, the weak areas of Iran economy is when it comes to the rice. Rice is so important in Iranian culture. Rice and bread, too important. And then with the case of bread, Iran produces more than 90% of wheat, and then they have the bread, and they don't have that much of a problem. But with the rice, it comes 20 or 30% from outside. Basically comes from India and Pakistan. If you remember, India was before the United States said to India, you cannot send rice to Iran, and you're going to be under sanctions or under tariffs if you do that. And I don't know what has happened since then, but it seems that India has reduced, the amount of rice sent to Iran. But there is other options for Iran, like Pakistan. Pakistan is the neighbor. It's a neighboring country. And they have just opened 6 overland lines to communicate with the Iranian economy, not only exporting things to Iran, but receiving the tankers on their ports, and they're sending, the cargo on the land, over the land to Iran. Iran has many options. It's not just about the Strait of Hormuz. I think after all, when you look at it, the pressure is there. The pressure is not just only economically, psychologically. They're trying to psychologically put pressure on Iranian people. But that's not there anymore. I think this is more important. Because you have to, when you want to break down a society, you have to psychologically destroy that society. This is literally what was happening before this war started. Because they literally wanted to put Iranian society on the verge of collapse before this war coming. That was the huge objective behind those protests in Iran. Even Donald Trump himself said they sent a lot of weapons to Iraqi Kurdistan and to send them to Iran. And he said they didn't send them, but I would say they sent them. They know the information. He's not that stupid to put everything out. When you send a lot of weapons to a little group in Iraqi Kurdistan, these Kurds, these terrorists, and then they're going to send many of them, to those people who are willing to do some sort of chaos in Iran. So they really wanted to put Iranian society on the verge of collapse. And you remember Donald Trump said, I'm coming to save you. I'm coming to liberate you. That was, again, part of the propaganda. But it didn't work during the war. They attacked. They saw how Iran responded. As time went by, Iran got stronger and stronger. And the United States was running, out of cruise missiles, interceptors, the radars were gone, and everything, was getting bad when it came to the American position and the Israeli position. So they have decided it was the United States, guys. Just remember, it was the United States begging for ceasefire, not the first time. This is the second time that the United States was asking Iran for a ceasefire. It happened in June 2025, in 12-day war. Literally, after 4 days or 5 days of war, in 12-day war, they started again talking, communicating with Iran, and let's find some sort of solution. J.D. Vance was trying to call in various times. Multiple times he called Iranian part and said, let's put an end to the conflict. But they They prepared for the second round. In February 28, they started again against Iranian people. This is the main reason that Iran is asking guarantees against aggression. So who's going to be able to guarantee that? Who's going to be able? This is the basic question for Iranian people right now. Is it going to be China, Russia, Europe? All these players were part of JCPOA, if you remember. It wasn't all. It was Europeans together with the United States. Russia was part of that. China was supporting that. But the United States is not, they don't care about what China feels or what Russia thinks. In these days, I would say they don't care about what Europe is talking about, because they have a master in Tel Aviv. They have a master, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his administration. They decide about everything in Washington. And whoever thinks differently, they're just missing the big picture, in my opinion. And what was the benefit for the United States so far? How did the United States benefit from this war? What was that? A single benefit out of this for the United States. Before this war started, there was no issue with the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, their main point is the Strait of Hormuz. Everything that Donald Trump is doing desperately is not about Iranian nuclear program, folks. It's not about Iranian nuclear program. If it was just about Iranian nuclear program, he had it before this war started. He had it on the table. It's about right now, because they wanted regime change in those days, but the regime change is gone. Right now, his biggest issue is the Strait of Hormuz. Can he open up the Strait of Hormuz? Yeah, he can open up if he follows what Iran has to say about the Strait of Hormuz. The mechanism Iran is defining together with Oman about the Strait of Hormuz. Look at what has happened. Iran has sent its message to Islamabad, getting back to Oman, talking with Omani government, updating what was said in Oman, and updating the proposal, because they were considering those sort of points that Omani government mentioned, and they wanted to update the proposal. They sent it back to the United States. There was some sort of communication. Right now, they came up with this 14-point plan. So I think the compensation would never happen. And when you see Iranians are talking about compensations, or somehow I would say sanctions lifted, it's a pure fantasy, and Iran totally knows that is a pure fantasy. But there is an objective behind this. This is the leverage they're going to have with the case of the Strait of Hormuz. Compensation, the United States is not going to pay anything. They're not going to release, the frozen assets, Iranian frozen assets. How can you imagine they lift the sanctions or compensate or paying Iranian government for the destruction the United States, the Israeli-US attacks on Iran has caused? They don't care. They don't want to pay. They will not pay Iran. And Iran knows that. They will not lift the sanctions. Here comes the case of the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is in the hand of Iranians. And Iran can compensate. Iran can use the Strait of Hormuz. Those countries who participated, who facilitated, they're going to be charged in the Strait of Hormuz. Not only a toll system, but there would be some additional charges. And Iran going to force them to pay the death and destruction they caused so far. And they were talking, they're legalizing that in the Iranian parliament. Then it goes to the Guardian Council. And after being, validated by the Guardian Council or voted by the Guardian Council, it's going to be Iranian law in the constitution, and nobody's able to change it. Are they going to learn from this? No, they're not going to learn from this. Are they going to accept it? No, they're not going to accept it. And nobody cares about if they're going to accept it in Iran or they're not going to accept it. It's the same sort of situation with what has happened with the eastern part of Ukraine. Is there anybody with the current, sort of talks between Russia and the United States together with European? After all, if something comes, if the war in Ukraine comes to an end, do you think that they're going to recognize the possession of the eastern part of Ukraine? Are they going to consider that as Russian territory? No, they're not going to accept that. That's going to change the reality for Russian people? No, because that's part of their constitution right now. That's the reality for Russians, which doesn't mean should be the reality for Americans or Europeans. We're not talking about, again, we're not talking about the Gulf of Mexico. We're talking about the Persian Gulf. We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. As Donald Trump put it out, the Strait of Iran. I think that would be a better term, a better name for the strait. And so this is what's going on for the Iranians. They know what they want; they're going to get it. And if there was a phone call between Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi and other countries. It had Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan. They talked with them, their counterparts, the foreign minister in those countries. They updated, they informed them what's going on right now between Iran and the United States and the new proposal, the angles, the different dimensions of this new proposal, and how Iran is going to do that, how Iran is going to participate with all of these countries. If they achieve something with the United States, they're going to, help facilitate. They're going to reduce the suffering in neighboring countries together with Iran. It's not just about, the other point is many people are feeling. Yesterday I was talking. I had an interview with Mario Naval, and he said that these countries in the Persian Gulf were concerned about Iran. He said, why? Where does this come from? Where does this come from? Where did Iran attack any of these countries in the Persian Gulf? There was no Iranian attack on any country in the last, I would say, 250 years. Iran has never attacked any country. Has never attacked. You have to see the reality. You cannot argue based on your fiction. You're something that you can make up. Some sort of assumption that doesn't exist. Because that's imaginary. That's not the reality. So what is the point when it comes to the GCC countries? GCC countries need to understand that if they want the security, they have to understand that the security, as far as they think about their security, the security of their neighbor is important as well. This is not Iran accepting a foreign, country, something, the United States coming on Iranian soil and putting troops on Iranian soil. It's them. GCC countries, they're bringing American troops from, some European countries. We have French bases, a French base. And this is the problem. Why do they need that? Why do they need that? If they can achieve a security architecture in the region which would provide security and prosperity and a better future for the whole region, why do they need to militarize the region? How was that helping them so far? Do you find any single point for this? What is the reason of having American bases, American troops? What is that? How is that going to help them? I think the evidence is out there. They have to understand. You can understand it. You can communicate. You can improve that. You can address or you can consider the main concerns of your neighbor. I'm talking about Iran, because Iran is so much concerned about these bases, American troops in GCC countries. More than 3,000 people were killed during this operation. How many people were killed in GCC countries together with Israel? That shows how Iran uses its strategy against these countries. It's not about killing people, but they let the United States and Israel use their country to attack Iran. It's not just about announcing, we're not going to use the United States using our airspace, which they did, by the way. They let the United States use their airspace to attack Iran. But they announced it before. They're not going to let it. It's not all about this. It's about the radars. It's about the communication, the troops, and everything. The network of, hostility that they have created in their countries against Iran. It's just unbelievable. I don't know how is that so difficult for them to understand that. They don't, if they want security, they don't need that. They can have an agreement with their neighbors. That's all. Look at the United States and look at Canada, look at Mexico. Can Mexico go, ask China to put Chinese troops on, Mexican soil? Because they want some sort of security, because the United States is a superpower. And we've seen what the United States is doing against, Mexico. Or with the case of Canada. Do they really accept that for Canada? If someone wants to, a Russian base in Canada, a Chinese base in Canada, because they want to balance against the United States. Because after all, we've seen so far what the Trump administration did to Canada and Mexico. But that makes sense. They want to put troops on the ground. That they're not going to tolerate that. It's about the United States. And they have to accept that. They have to understand the reality. By the way, this is the main problem in Ukraine as well. They got so close to the Russian border. With the case of Ukraine, they were at the Russia's doorstep. They want to put the missiles, nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Nobody can accept that. Nobody going to be happy with that. And Iran is going to continue if these countries, GCC countries, and everybody knows today, I think when it comes to the tolerance, when it comes to resilience, Iranian society is prepared. But none of these GCC countries is prepared for that. They don't know what is sanction. They don't know what is the difficulty that, the economic difficulties. Look at what has happened to UAE for 40 days. They're running out of, they're running out of cash. They're asking for the United States to bail out. And how come a country that everybody was talking about Dubai and Abu Dhabi and this UAE being, where is that? This huge model. There is no model out there. These are not successful economies. These are house of cards. I think what has revealed during this war that all of these economies, they're not real economy. They're house of cards when it comes to the basic of the economy. That's why they're talking about diversifying their economy right now, but it's going to happen overnight? No. Where is the basis? Where is the knowledge? They don't have it. Are they going to import it? UAE just, they fired thousands of, Pakistani workers in UAE because they were supporting Iran because during the war. And this is the reality. Who's going to get back to UAE to work with them, for them, if they don't tolerate? Instead of instead of modifying the policies, they're going after the people. That's not going to change the problem. UAE has decided to get out of OPEC. They're leaving GCC. So in a short run, you may feel that they can send more oil, they can sell more, and they can somehow improve the situation. In a long run, they're going to lose. Because when you talk about OPEC, you're talking about important countries when it comes to the oil production. And they're just leaving that to help the United States. I would say Donald Trump told them, if you wanted some sort of bailout, then you have to get out of the OPEC. You have to help us with the case of the price of oil right now. This shows how deep these countries are dependent on the United States. These are not real economies. These are not real economies. And the other point is the peace. When it comes to the peace, Iran is talking about on all fronts, including Lebanon. Lebanon is so much important for Iran. I would say if the United States provides everything, without Lebanon, there would be no peace. There would be no agreement, just to understand how important Lebanon is for Iran. Because they don't want Israel to do what they did in Gaza, in the West Bank. What they're doing as we talk in Gaza, in the West Bank. They're not going to let Israel to go that far. And this is the tricky part of what's going on for Donald Trump. That's why I'm not optimistic about what's going on. There would be no, looking at each and every point in this 14-point plan. You look at it and people are laughing, is Iran somehow believing that they're going to do this? No, Iran knows that they're not going to provide, they're not going to get along with any of these points. So, but Iran is showing its position, how important Lebanon is for Iran. They know that Israel is not, the Trump administration is not going to be able to control the Benjamin Netanyahu administration. Not only Benjamin Netanyahu, let's assume the position wins in Israel like, Yair Lapid or together with Naftali Bennett. They're not that much different from Benjamin Netanyahu. They want to occupy the southern part of Lebanon, making a buffer zone. They're talking about buffer zone, by the way. Whenever they want to seize, when they want to occupy the land, they call it, the buffer zone. Golan Heights was a buffer zone. And right now they're going up and getting more territory of Syria. They were attacking Syria yesterday. They attacked Syria again and again. This is not Bashar Assad in Syria. This is the guy they supported. This is the guy that CIA supported, Mossad supported. And the government in Turkey facilitated the whole process and helped them, cooperate with them to put in place in Syria. But Israel doesn't want that. Ben-Gvir wants to assassinate, Al-Jolani or Shara, whoever he is, or the head chopper of HTS. They want to assassinate him. And this is not about, the assassination of HTS, because they don't want a unified Syria. They want to break Syria down as it is right now. You have 5 regions, 4 regions, 3 regions. Israel wants all the southern part of Syria. They want to go up to Damascus. With the case of Lebanon is the same. They're not going to stop there. That's why this is the importance of what Iran is talking about, by the way, with the case of Lebanon. If there was Bashar Assad in Syria, they would add Syria to this case. But this is not Bashar Assad in power. This is the problem of Turkey right now. Because Turkey is becoming the main enemy of Israel. And It's not becoming the main enemy of Israel. It's becoming the next problem of the United States, because the government in the United States is run, or the policies are defined by Israel, and they have to follow the Israeli policies in the Middle East. So Iran, Turkey, next they're going to be Pakistan. How long are they prepared to continue with these wars? Is that going to help? Does it have anything to just assume what has happened so far with the case of this war, with the support that the Biden administration gave to Benjamin Netanyahu and Israelis to destroy Gaza and the West Bank. And then after we had Donald Trump coming and giving everything to Benjamin Netanyahu, basically go ahead and destroy everything and kill people. What is the benefit for the United States? What is that? Nothing. They're not winning that. With the case of war against Iran, is the United States winning? Is there any point for the United States showing that the United States is winning? No, they're not winning. They're losing. It's not just about the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz. It's about the big picture. China, just looking at what's going on in the Middle East, the bases, American bases around China, so they can literally put an end to all of them if they decide to do it. Is the United States going to be able to confront China in Taiwan? I doubt it. I really don't see the United States going that far anymore. So getting back to Donald Trump, that's why many people thought in the United States who voted for Donald Trump that the United States is going to focus on the Western Hemisphere. It's going to basically focus on the United States, bringing jobs back, improving the American economy. Where is that? Because they don't know. It's all about zero-sum game. You put tariffs in China, and China going to react. They forced China to react. And when China decides to react, they find themselves more mightier or more powerful. They feel, because these countries, I would say, I don't know, it's part of the Eastern culture. They don't want to use all the cards they have until they're forced to use those cards. It was the same case with the case of Russia. Russia was forced. Russia was somehow, you look at the situation with Russia, Russia was in, they sent 100,000 troops in the eastern part of Ukraine. And at the same time, they were negotiating with the United States. They didn't want it. They didn't want the war. Nobody was giving them any sort of, they take them seriously and talking with them in a serious manner. Nobody wanted that. That's why we have these 4 years of war. And what is the outcome for Russia today? The eastern part of Ukraine is part of Russia, as it is in their constitution. And what is the importance of this part? It's like something like 80%, 82% of GDP of Ukraine. If this war continues and they get Odessa, that's literally the end of Ukraine as a state. It's nothing. There would be nothing left of Ukraine. Nothing. If there is no connection to the Black Sea. It's not going to be Russia. I think as of today, we would say Odessa is not going to be part of Ukraine as it was before the war started in Ukraine in 2021 or in February 2022. So whatever happens, Russia is going to control Odessa. And they know how to do that. Russia economically, militarily, geopolitically redefined itself and today is more powerful. Right now, they know because of the Russian cheap oil and gas, Germany was able to flourish, to improve. That's gone for Germany. That's gone for Germany. It's amazing looking at Germany today. They help. Olaf Scholz was next to Joe Biden talking about, if this war happens, if Russia invades Ukraine, we're going to put an end to the Nord Stream pipeline. And they did it. They did it. And they destroyed not Russian economy, they destroyed the German economy. To this day, they're suffering from what has happened with the Nord Stream pipeline. And Germany is just unbelievably, they're hugely missing the big picture, because before this war happening between Iran and the United States, the German Chancellor Merz was talking about, they're doing our dirty job. We have to put an end to this, regime in Iran, this aggressive regime in Iran who's killing its own people. Let's do regime change in Iran. What he's talking about today, have you heard him? He says that the United States was humiliated in this war, because these guys are waiting in the background. If the United States was winning, he was participating. And we're winning. They're doing our dirty job. We are supporting them. Since the United States is not winning that, he's just coming out and just saying that they're losing. We're not part of this humiliation. We are in Europe. We are different. But you are part of it. You are part of it. You did everything. You helped. You facilitated. You helped in terms of defensive capabilities. Your radars or bases, everything you had, you helped them. The only thing they didn't do, it was with the case of the Strait of Hormuz. They said, no, this is not our war. Because if they went there, if they have decided to go in the Strait of Hormuz, that would be the end for Europeans. They don't have it. Militarily, they don't have it to go there. If the United States, with this navy, huge navy, as they call it, the biggest navy, because I would say no one has the capabilities of the United States when it comes to the navy, or maybe China and Russia have it. I'm not aware of, but at least the United States is talking about it. But they were not able to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Just imagine the United States is not able to open up the Strait of Hormuz, asking Europeans to do that for them. How ridiculous is that? Europe knows that. They were not to sacrifice. The reason they're continuing the war in Ukraine, because they're not sacrificing their own people. They're sacrificing Slavic people. They're sacrificing Ukrainians in this proxy war. But when it came to Iran, they have to sacrifice themselves. That's why they said, this is not our war. This is the United States is being defeated in the Middle East. This is the reality of Europe today. And I think the end of naval blockade, Iran is trying to, after all, let's put it this way, what is workable? What is logical so far? I think the blockade, Donald Trump and his administration is getting to the point that the blockade is not working. It's not working. So what is that? What is the point right now? Let's find some sort of solution. How can we do that? We remove, or we just end to this blockade, and Iran has to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Just as simple as that. At the end, you're going to have something like this. And the Strait of Hormuz and the mechanism of the Strait of Hormuz and how Iran would open it up, how Iran would charge other countries is going to be totally based on the Iranian policies. But the other point, if this is the optimistic point, the United States just removing blockade, leaving the region without lifting sanctions, without paying compensation, anything. They're not going to do anything. And just as simple as that. And I think they're going to send forces in these GCC countries, but I hope that they're wise enough to understand that if they continue put radars and these, electronic warfare systems in GCC countries, Iran going to hit them back again. That's not going to change the reality. That's why I don't see anytime soon the United States decides to do that. And the other point is the worst scenario would be the United States continuing with the blockade. This is the worst scenario, in my opinion, which would bring the war again to the table. And the two parties going to fight again. It's not going to be, if it's not all of a sudden the two countries attacking each other, we're going to have gradually these tensions growing and growing, then breaking out in a new round of war. Because Iran is capable to respond to the United States. And as time goes by, the United States would see how Iran would react. There would be many confrontation between the United States and Iran before the war again breaks out in a new round. And I see from what I've seen, from what I've heard from the Iranian capabilities, they're preparing for that. They're well organized because Iran has two swords in its hands. And they have the diplomacy, as they put it with 14-point plan, and they have the military power, the second sword. And they're using these two swords. Whenever they need diplomacy, talks, they use it. Whenever they need, the military power, they're using their military power, their army, IRGC all together. But the United States is somehow, it's something like taking two swords, it's just hitting each and everything. This is the way I see it, literally. They don't do it. You don't see that sort of strategy to wisely use these two swords. But Iran is using wisely the two swords whenever they need diplomacy, whenever they need, to come and respond militarily to the United States. That's the whole game on the part of Iranians. And they're going to continue with that. They don't have any problem to continue because the Strait of Hormuz, they call it right now in Iran, is more important than nationalization of Iranian oil. The Iranian oil was nationalized because of, we had the British Empire in Iran basically stealing Iranian oil. Then Iranian oil was nationalized. Right now, they're talking about the same thing with the Strait of Hormuz. It's more important than nationalizing Iranian oil. It's more important. You look at the Iranian people today, majority, overwhelming majority, they're talking about this. The other point would be the case of the Iranian nuclear program. They're not going to get back to Iranian nuclear program anytime soon because Donald Trump would not be able to put an end to the war between Israel and Lebanon, lifting sanctions, frozen assets. They have to do everything before getting to the point of, Iranian nuclear program. This is the difficulties that Donald Trump and his administration are facing right now. On the other hand, the government in Iran is under tremendous pressure since this war started. The majority of people right now is putting pressure. They're talking about basically how can we guarantee the first point that Iran is asking for, guarantees against aggression. They need nuclear deterrent. The people are talking about it. They need nuclear deterrent. They have a country in the region called Israel with something like 300 to 700, nuclear bombs. Nobody sees any sort of responsibility when it comes to the behavior of the Israeli government. They can do, if they decide, in 1 hour to attack Iran with nuclear bomb, they can do it. Nobody can stop them from doing this. And people in Iran understand that. They don't want Israel to attack them or the United States to attack them. And worse, to attack them with nuclear weapons. So this is the huge area that I think that's going to change. in the Iranian strategy. The changes are coming, and Iran is prepared for all of the escalations. They're basically defined with each step of escalation. They know how they would react. Somehow, when it comes to some level of escalation, they may go preemptive. This is the strategy. And let's see what would happen. Donald Trump right now is talking about he's reading the Iranian 14-point plan. I don't know if he's reading, and I don't see Donald Trump reading anything. I don't see Pete Hegseth being capable of reading anything. Or maybe there's some people in the administration, let's assume that, who may understand, who may find some sort of off-ramp. As I've mentioned, the United States just leaving the blockade, removing the blockade, just getting back to the United States. And Iran going to continue with the Strait of Hormuz. Then this is the final point. I don't see anything, beyond that happening between the two parties in the time being or in the near future. And that's it. Thank you so much. I was trying to give my understanding of what's going on, and let's see what would happen. Great pleasure, as always.